I thought volunteering at an animal shelter would be wholesome. Messy, sure. Smelly, definitely. But the kind of smelly that comes from warm fur and kibble, not the kind that crawls under your skin. Bramblewood Animal Shelter was smaller than I expected. The building sat on the edge of town, half hidden by tall pines that leaned in as if eavesdropping. Its parking lot was cracked, with weeds pushing through the asphalt. The sign out front, cheerful blue letters, a paw print for the O in Bramblewood, was faded enough that the paw looked more like a smudge. I walked in, expecting a smiling staff member, maybe a quick tour, and then to get started with feeding or cleaning. Instead, a thin woman with a sharp ponytail looked up from behind the reception desk and said, "You're the new one." No introduction, no handshake, just that. "Mara?" I asked, remembering the name from the email. She gave the smallest nod, eyes already dropping to a stack of paperwork. "You're late." I wasn't. I was 15 minutes early, but I decided not to argue. She reached under the desk and pulled out a binder. It was thick, heavy, and smelled faintly of mildew and old coffee. The cover was peeling in places, and there was a sticky ring on the front, where someone had set a mug down without a coaster. Across the top, in blocky, uneven Sharpie, "Rules. Go through this," she said, sliding it across the desk. "Don't skip anything. Follow it exactly. We'll start after." I sat in the corner of the lobby and flipped it open. The first few pages were what you'd expect: feeding schedules, cleaning rotations, how to log intake forms. But the further I went, the stranger it got. Rule 7. Always greet the calico in kennel 3, even if it's empty. Rule 12. If an animal refuses food 3 times, stop offering until it asks. It will ask. Rule 19. If the hallway to the special care room feels longer than usual, turn around immediately. Some were oddly specific about timing. Rule 21. Lights in the west wing must be switched off in the following order: 6, 4, 5, 1, 3, 2. Rule 28. Never open the isolation room after sunset, even if you hear scratching. Others didn't make sense at all. Rule 33. Do not acknowledge the tall man if you see him near the kennels. He doesn't work here. I looked up at Mara. She was still shuffling papers, pen scratching in quick, irritated strokes. "Some of these," I started. "You'll get used to it," she cut in, not looking at me. "Rules keep you safe. Follow them, and you'll do fine." I wanted to ask safe from what, but her tone made it clear questions weren't welcome. The orientation lasted about 4 minutes. Mara led me down a narrow hallway lined with kennels, gesturing vaguely at where supplies were kept. We passed the cat room, the dog room, and a door labeled "Special Care" in block letters. She didn't slow down near it. "No phones in the wings," she said over her shoulder. "No earbuds. Always keep an ear out." "For what?" She didn't answer. The rest of the day was normal enough. I scrubbed food bowls, refilled water, swept up tufts of fur. Most of the animals were friendly: a beagle that tried to lick my face clean, a pair of kittens that kept batting at the bristles of my broom. I started to relax, telling myself the creepy rules were some kind of inside joke. It was near the end of my shift, around 6:30, when I went to check the last row of kennels in the back wing. According to the log sheet, all the cages here were empty animals either adopted out or moved to special care. Still, I like to check each one for leftover bedding or dirty bowls. The last cage on the left was marked vacant in big red letters. Inside, there was nothing but a bare floor and shadows from the dim overhead light. I was about to move on when I heard it. A slow, steady sound. Inhale, exhale. Not loud, more like the rise and fall of someone sleeping just out of sight. I froze, my hand still on the clipboard. The sound was definitely coming from inside the cage. I crouched a little, peering through the bars. Empty, completely empty. No bedding, no water dish. Just cold concrete and the faint smell of disinfectant. The breathing didn't stop. If anything, it got a little deeper, a little more aware of me. I leaned in, trying to figure out if maybe air was coming from a vent or pipe. My breath fogged the bars, and the breathing on the other side paused. I stepped back fast, bumping into the kennel behind me. Something about the stillness that followed was worse than the sound itself. It was as if whoever, whatever had been there was holding its breath, listening to me. "Don't linger there," Mara's voice snapped from the hall. I jumped. She was standing at the corner, arms crossed. I hadn't heard her approach. "It's empty," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Her eyes flicked to the cage and then back to me. "Then move on." I did. By the time I left that night, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe air ducts, maybe the building settling. Old places make weird noises. Still, as I passed the reception desk, Mara called after me. "Bring the binder home. Read it again, especially rules 7 through 12. When I got to my car, I noticed a detail I hadn't seen before. The binder's back cover was warped, as if something had been pressing outward from inside it. That night, while I'm reading the binder in bed, I'll notice a fresh, wet paw print on one of the pages, a rule about feeding times that wasn't there before. By my second shift, I'd read the binder front to back twice. Some of the rules still made no sense, but I had started memorizing them. I told myself it was just like any other workplace. Every place has its quirks. Only here, those quirks came with timestamps and warnings. Mara didn't greet me when I came in. She was already in the supply room, portioning out dry cat food into metal bowls with a practiced rhythm. "Cats first," she said, sliding the bowls toward me without looking up. "Always cats first, then dogs, then—" She hesitated just a second too long. "Special care." I already knew the order from the binder, but her tone made me double-check the page in my head. Rule 17. Always feed in the correct order: cats, then dogs, then special care. Never feed the special care room after 8:13 p.m. It was 6:45 p.m., plenty of time. The cats were easy. Most of them rushed to the front of their enclosures, meowing and pawing at the bars like I was the best thing that had happened to them all day. I talked to them as I worked soft, nonsense words you use with pets. It was the first time since starting here that the place felt almost normal. The dogs were more chaotic. A shepherd mix barked at me the whole time, tail wagging in this jerky, desperate rhythm. A small terrier refused to come out of the back of its kennel until I slid the food dish halfway inside. By the time I finished with the last dog, it was just after 8:05. That left the special care room. The hallway leading to it felt narrower than I remembered, shadows pooling in the corners, even though the overhead lights were on. The door itself was plain, unmarked, with a latch that looked heavier than it needed to be. I balanced the last bowl of food in my hand, hesitating. The binder hadn't said why 8:13 was important, only that it was. I checked my watch. 8:08. I knocked once, not because the rules said to, but because it felt wrong to just walk in. No answer. I turned the latch and slipped inside. The special care room was quiet, too quiet. No barking, no meowing. Just a faint hum from the old fluorescent lights. There were only 3 kennels here, each draped with a dark cloth so I couldn't see inside. I set the food down in front of the first kennel and lifted the cloth just enough to slide the bowl in. No movement inside. No sound. The second kennel was the same. When I got to the third, I paused. The cloth hung lower, brushing the floor. I bent down to place the bowl, and that's when I heard it. Not a bark, not a meow. A voice. High-pitched, halting, like a child trying to mimic an animal sound. A drawn-out murrow that rose at the end, like it was testing the word. Then a giggle. My hand froze on the latch. The sound came again, but sharper this time, a choppy, wet sort of growl, followed by a whisper I couldn't make out. It was right against the bars, close enough that I could hear breath moving through teeth. I took a step back. My watch read 8:12. That's when Mara's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Out! Now!" I turned to find her standing in the doorway, eyes fixed on me with a tight, almost panicked expression. "I was just—" "You were about to break Rule 17, she said, and her tone left no room for argument. I set the bowl down on the nearest counter and walked past her into the hallway. She didn't follow right away, and I didn't hear her feed whatever was in that third kennel. The rest of the shift was tense. Mara didn't speak to me again except to hand me a mop. I caught her watching me more than once, like she was making sure I didn't wander back towards special care. When I finally clocked out, the air outside felt sharper, colder, like stepping into a different season. I told myself it was just the relief of leaving that cramped hallway behind. I drove home with the radio on low, trying to shake off the sound I'd heard. That giggle didn't belong in an animal shelter. It didn't belong anywhere. It wasn't until I got inside my apartment and kicked off my shoes that I noticed it. A single paw print. It was on my kitchen tile, just inside the doorway. Small, wet, and perfectly clear 4 toes, a pad in the middle, but it didn't look like any cat or dog print I'd ever seen. The pad was too long, almost oval, and the claws at the tips of the toes curved inward like hooks. I wiped it up fast, telling myself maybe I'd stepped in something outside and tracked it in. But when I went to throw the paper towel away, my stomach dropped. There was another paw print on my kitchen counter. That night, I waked to a faint, wet shuffling sound somewhere in my apartment, like paws dragging across wood. It circles my bed once before fading into the walls. Then comes the breathing, low and steady. The same cadence I heard from the empty cage, only now it's less than a foot from my head. The first time I saw the isolation room, it barely registered. It was just another door in a back hallway I didn't have a reason to use. The only reason I noticed it at all was because the binder had a rule about it. Rule 28. If you hear scratching from isolation, do not open it. Do not acknowledge it. At the time, I'd assumed it was for dangerous animals, maybe aggressive dogs, feral cats, the kind of animals you keep separate for safety. I didn't think much about it again until my 3rd week. The weather had been strange all day, low clouds, heavy air, the kind that makes your skin prickle like a storm's coming. When I clocked in, the air smelled faintly metallic, like damp pennies. Mara barely spoke to me, just handed me a spray bottle and a rag, and told me to deep clean the back hallway. That hallway was narrow, with the kind of dim yellow lights that made everything look a little sickly. Kennels lined one side, storage closets the other, and at the very end, the isolation room. The door was painted a flat, dull gray. The word isolation was stenciled in black, all caps, with the paint slightly chipped. There was no window, just a heavy latch that looked older than the building itself. I started cleaning from the opposite end of the hall, working my way toward it. The work was boring: spray, wipe, rinse, repeat. And after a while, the sound of rain against the roof became the only real background noise, until the lights flickered. It wasn't much, just a quick dimming and return, but it made me glance toward the isolation room. And that's when I heard it. A scratch. Slow, deliberate, like something dragging its nails or claws along the inside of the door. I froze, rag halfway up the wall. My brain started flipping through explanations. Maybe a raccoon had gotten inside. Maybe a dog was pawing at the door. But the sound came again, measured and patient. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. The rule flashed in my mind. Do not open it. Do not acknowledge it. So I went back to cleaning, forcing my shoulders to stay relaxed, forcing my hands not to shake. But it was like trying to ignore an itch under your skin. Every nerve felt tuned to that door. The scratching stopped. And then, in my peripheral vision, I saw the handle turn. It was slow, almost lazy, the way you'd open a door when you didn't want to wake someone. I kept wiping the wall, pretending not to notice, heart thudding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The latch clicked softly, not enough to open, just enough to let me know it could. I wanted to run, but my legs felt locked. I counted to 10 in my head. At 5, the handle stopped moving. At 10, the scratching began again, this time higher up on the door, like whatever was inside had stood up. That was enough for me. I turned, shoved my cleaning supplies into the nearest storage closet, and ran to the front lobby. Mara was there, sorting through a stack of forms. She looked up when I came in. "You're pale," she said. "I think something's in isolation," I managed. Her eyes didn't change. "There's always something in isolation. Shouldn't we?" "No." Her voice was sharp enough to cut me off. "It's locked for a reason. You don't feed it. You don't water it. You don't even talk to it. You just keep moving." She went back to her paperwork like that was the end of it. And maybe it should have been. But later, when I was hauling trash to the dumpster out back, I noticed something strange. The isolation room's only window, a narrow, high strip of glass barely big enough for light to pass through, was completely black. Not just dim, black, like someone had painted over it. When I came in the next morning, the window was clear again. That night, a golden retriever I'd fed earlier, Sunny, disappears from his kennel without a trace. Sunny was the kind of dog people came to shelters hoping to find. Golden retriever, maybe 3 years old, with a perpetual grin and a tail that wagged like it was powered by its own motor. He was the kind of dog you could picture riding shotgun in a pickup truck, head out the window, tongue flapping in the breeze. He'd been brought in a few days before, found wandering the edge of Bramblewood forest. No collar, no microchip, but he was clean and friendly, like someone had taken care of him until very recently. On the morning it happened, I was assigned to feed the dogs while Mara handled intake paperwork. Sunny was in kennel 12, his front paws up on the gate before I even got there, tail thumping against the wall. "All right, buddy," I said, sliding his bowl through the hatch. "Breakfast is served." He dove into the food with happy snorts, barely lifting his head as I moved down the row. By the time I finished the last kennel, the air was filled with the sound of chewing, crunching, and the occasional satisfied huff. Everything seemed normal. Around noon, I came back through to check water levels. When I reached kennel 12, I stopped. The bowl was still there, half full, the water dish untouched, and Sunny was gone. The gate was closed and latched. I tugged on it, still secure. I checked the clipboard for notes, thinking maybe someone had moved him for a walk or grooming, but there was nothing. No one had logged him out. "Mara," I called down the hall. She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a rag. "What?" "Sunny's not here." Her brow furrowed, but not the way you'd expect when someone tells you an animal is missing. It was more like she was running through a mental checklist. "Kennel locked?" "Yeah." She stepped closer, peered in, then checked the latch herself. "No bedding disturbed? Looks like he was just here. And now he's not." She straightened, her voice calm but clipped. "Check special care." I hesitated. "I didn't move him." "Check it anyway." The special care room was empty. The bowls I'd set out the night before were gone, replaced with clean ones. The draped kennels were still and silent. When I came back to tell her, she was already in the office pulling up the security feed. We watched together as the footage from kennel 12 played on the grainy black and white monitor. At 10:17 a.m., Sunny was there, lying down with his head on his paws. At 10:18, he lifted his head, ears twitching, like he'd heard something. Then he stood up, walked toward the front of the kennel and stopped. For 30 full seconds, he just stood there, looking straight ahead. Not at the door, not at the camera, at something we couldn't see, just beyond the edge of the frame. And then, he was gone. Not walked out, not lifted. Just there 1 second, gone the next. The food bowl didn't even move. I stared at the screen, waiting for him to reappear. The door never opened, Mara finished, her voice flat. We rewound it 3 times, same thing every time. Could it be a glitch? I asked. Her eyes stayed on the monitor. No, that was all she said before shutting the feed off. I wanted to press her, but the air in the room felt heavier, thicker. I'd learned by now that pushing for answers here didn't get you anywhere. The rest of the day was slow. The rain from yesterday had turned into a steady drizzle, and the shelter felt even more closed in than usual. I kept expecting Sunny to reappear. Maybe someone had moved him without logging it. Maybe it was some elaborate prank. It wasn't until I was getting ready to leave that I saw it. Sitting on the volunteer desk was a dog collar, worn leather, brass buckle, name tag shaped like a bone. Sunny. It was wet, droplets clinging to the metal tag like it had just been pulled from water. I touched it cold, and it smelled faintly of pond water, that murky, algae-heavy scent that sticks to your hands no matter how much you wash them. When I looked back toward the office, Mara was watching me from the doorway. Her expression was unreadable. "You can go," she said. I left the collar where it was. The next morning, I found something new in my binder. A page I hadn't seen before, slipped between rules 17 and 18. The paper was a different color, more yellowed than the rest, the handwriting darker and more jagged. Rule 17. So, if an animal disappears, do not search for it. Do not speak its name near water. There was no explanation. No note about when this had been added, or by who. I looked up to find Mara leaning on the counter, sipping coffee. "When did this? It's always been there," she said before I could finish. Only it hadn't. I was sure of it. That night, Mara assigns me my first overnight watch. At exactly 2:15 a.m., the front bell rings, and the voice outside calls me by name. When Mara told me I'd be covering the overnight watch, I thought she was joking. Volunteers didn't usually do nights that was staff-only territory. "You'll just be in the lobby," she said, flipping through paperwork without looking at me. "Keep the lights on, keep the doors locked, keep an eye on the front bell." That last part caught me. "Bell?" She glanced up like I'd just asked her to explain what a door was. "The one by the front door. If it rings, you don't answer." That was it. No elaboration. Just another rule for the growing list. The shelter was different at night. The hum of activity during the day was gone, replaced by silence so deep I could hear the building itself settling faint pops in the rafters, the groan of the water heater, the occasional tick of cooling metal. The kennels were dark except for the faint green glow of the exit signs, casting long shadows through the hallways. Most of the animals slept, but every so often I'd hear a dog give a low, restless whine or the soft sound of a cat's claws catching on its blanket. I set myself up at the front desk with a thermos of coffee, the binder of rules, which I still wasn't anywhere close to memorizing, and a notepad in case Mara expected me to log anything. The big wall clock read 1:47 a.m. Somewhere outside, rain had started again. It made the front windows look like they were melting. At 2:15 exactly, the bell rang. It wasn't a polite ding or a quick buzz. It was the old-fashioned kind, the kind with a long metallic chime that rattles in your teeth. I froze. It rang again, slower this time. The rule was clear: don't answer. That was fine by me. My curiosity had been burned out by too many things in this place that I wished I'd never seen. But then a voice followed. "Hey," it said. My name. Not shouted, not whispered, just spoken, like we were already in the middle of a conversation. I gripped the arms of my chair. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It sounded like my brother. "Come on, it's cold out here." He was hundreds of miles away. I'd talked to him the week before. There was no way. The bell rang again, shorter this time. I stayed put. My eyes were fixed on the double glass doors. The rain made it impossible to see more than a smear of shapes and motion outside. "You don't have to open it," the voice said, closer now. "Just talk to me." The way the words were spaced, the rhythm, it was exactly how my brother talked. Exactly. The binder was still on the desk. I opened it with shaking hands, flipping through until I found the section on overnight shifts. Rule 41. If the bell rings between 2:13 and 2:17, do not answer. Do not look directly outside. It will use a voice you trust. The bell rang again, louder, then silence. The kind of silence that's worse than noise because you know it's waiting. I sat there for what felt like hours, coffee cooling untouched beside me, pen rolling slowly back and forth on the notepad. When the clock finally hit 3 o'clock, I let myself breathe again. I'd made it. Whatever that was, It had gone, or so I thought. At 3:07, there was a scratching at the front door. Slow, deliberate. The sound was wrong. Not nails on glass or metal, more like something dragging over wood. The doors weren't wood. The scratching stopped, and the bell rang one final time. I didn't move, didn't breathe. When I finally got up the nerve to glance toward the door, not at it, just toward it, I saw something. In the reflection of the rain-slick glass, lit faintly by the lobby's fluorescent lights, there was the silhouette of a dog. It sat perfectly still. Its ears were too long for any breed I knew, hanging almost to the ground. Its head tilted slowly, as if studying me, and then it was gone. When Mara came in at 6 o'clock, I was still sitting at the desk, binder open, coffee untouched. "You didn't answer, did you?" she asked. I shook my head. "Good," she said. "But you looked." It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. When I got home, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. It was from my brother. At least it sounded like him. But the message was only 5 seconds long. And all it said was, "Come on, it's cold out here." The next evening, one of the cats in special care starts calling my name in my brother's voice. By now, I'd stopped thinking of the binder's rules as suggestions. They weren't warnings in the casual sense, they were survival steps, written by people who'd already seen what happens when you don't follow them. Still, there was nothing in there about an animal saying my name. The special care room was always last on the feeding schedule. Cats first, dogs second, then special care, and always before 8:13 p.m. I'd been meticulous about that after my first close call in the hallway. But this night, something felt off the second I walked in. Special care was quiet. Normally, there'd be at least some low noise, a cat pawing at the front of its enclosure, the shuffle of movement in the larger pens. This time, nothing. The air smelled faintly of bleach and something else, a coppery tang that made me think of the metallic scent from the isolation room days earlier. I checked the clipboard on the wall. Feeding time was still 30 minutes away, well before the cutoff. I figured I'd get it over with early and be out of there. I was scooping wet food into bowls when I heard it. "Hey," my name. I froze, scoop halfway in the can. It had come from the far left corner where we kept the older, harder-to-adopt cats. I turned slowly. Sitting on the top shelf of its enclosure was a gray tabby named Margot. She was small, with a bent ear and cloudy eyes, the kind of cat that barely made a sound even when you fed her. Her mouth didn't move, but the voice came again, perfectly clear, perfectly human. "Hey, it's cold out here." The exact words I'd heard at the front door during the overnight shift. My brother's voice. I backed up, nearly knocking the scoop into the sink. My brain was scrambling for explanations, a hidden speaker, someone playing a prank. But there was no one else in special care. The door was shut, the hallway beyond empty. Margot blinked at me, slow and unbothered, like I was the one acting strange. Her mouth opened just a little, like she was about to yawn. "Come on." The same tone, the same rhythm. I stepped toward the door. "Don't." That word froze me harder than any rule in the binder ever had. I glanced back. Margot was still in the same position, but her tail had gone stiff, curled tight against her body. She tilted her head, the same slow tilt I'd seen in the silhouette outside the shelter during the overnight shift. My hands shook as I fumbled the key in the door and stepped into the hallway. The moment the latch clicked behind me, I heard something hit the glass from inside hard. Not claws, not paws, something heavier. I didn't look. I went straight to the lobby, where Mara was restocking the treat bins. She barely glanced up. "You saw it, didn't you?" she said. It talked. Margot talked." "That's not Margot," she said flatly. "Not after dark." I stared at her. "Then what?" "It's looking for a way in," she said. "You don't give it one." The rest of my shift passed in a fog. Every creak of the building made me flinch. When I finally left for the night, the parking lot was nearly empty. My car was one of only 3 left. The rain had stopped, but the air was cold enough to see my breath. As I unlocked the driver's side, I thought I heard it again, my brother's voice, faint and distant, from the direction of the shelter. I didn't turn around. When I got home, my phone buzzed. Another voicemail. 5 seconds long. This time it was just breathing. Low, steady, and in the background faint, but there the sound of a cat purring. The next day, a new rule mysteriously appears in the binder in handwriting that doesn't match Mara's or anyone else's, and it has my name in it. The binder was waiting for me when I walked in, sitting open on the front desk. That in itself wasn't strange. Mara always left it there for the morning shift, but the page it was turned to was different. It wasn't one of the typed, laminated rules. It was loose-leaf paper, cheap notebook stock, the kind that curls at the edges. The page was wedged between two of the usual procedures, like someone had slipped it in when no one was looking. The handwriting was jagged and hurried, in black pen that had bled faintly through to the back. It was only one sentence, but it felt like it was written directly to me. If you hear your own voice from anywhere inside the shelter, leave immediately. Do not finish your shift. Do not look for Mara. Do not answer the animals. Do not speak at all until you are outside the property line. The air in the lobby felt colder, though the heater was humming. I ran my finger over the ink, as if touching it might prove it was a prank, but the paper itself was cold too, like it had been left outside before being slipped in. Morning! I jumped so hard the binder nearly slid off the desk. Mara was leaning in the doorway to the kennels, arms crossed. She wasn't smiling, she rarely did, but there was no edge of suspicion this time. Her voice was flat. "You read it?" she asked. "Yeah. Who wrote it? You'll know if you need to follow it." That was all she said, before turning and disappearing down the hall, her boots thudding dully against the tile. The morning was routine enough, or at least it should have been. I scrubbed down the dog runs, refilled the water bowls, signed off on the intake log for a stack of donated blankets. But every movement felt mechanical, like muscle memory taking over while my mind kept looping back to that note. It didn't say if you hear your name. It said if you hear your own voice. There was something fundamentally worse about that, like whatever was out there had moved up a rung in its mimicry. At 11:40 a.m., I was in the cat wing, checking litter trays. The animals were restless pacing, flicking their tails, making short, sharp meows instead of their usual long calls. It was the kind of tension you can feel in your ribs without knowing why. That's when I heard it. Hey, not from a person, not from the intercom, from my left, low to the ground, where a black and white Tom named Jupiter sat watching me from behind the bars of his kennel. "Hey," it said again. It was my voice. My exact voice, not just the pitch, but the quiet, almost breathless way I say it when I'm trying not to wake someone. The scoop slipped from my hand and landed in the litter with a muffled thud. Jupiter didn't blink. His mouth didn't move. Then, in my voice again, "It's cold out here." Every instinct screamed at me to back away, to leave right then, but the rule didn't say what would happen if I didn't follow it. I took one step toward the door. Jupiter's head twitched upward like he'd noticed something moving behind me. Then my voice came from the far end of the hall, louder, clearer. "Come see." It didn't sound like an invitation. It sounded like a demand. I was halfway to the exit when Mara appeared, blocking the doorway. "You heard it," she said. "Yeah," I managed. It's me. It's my voice." Her eyes flicked past me toward the kennels. "You need to go. Now." "What is it?" "Not something you can help." She stepped aside, and I moved past her fast, feeling like the hallway had stretched an extra 50 feet. When I got outside, the cold air hit me hard. The parking lot was empty except for my car and a white panel van I didn't recognize. The van had no markings, but the engine was running, visible in faint white plumes from the exhaust. I didn't look at the driver, didn't look at the windshield, just got in my car and drove. I should have gone home, but halfway there I pulled into a coffee shop. I needed somewhere public, somewhere loud. Inside, The hiss of the espresso machine and the low hum of conversations almost made me believe I'd overreacted. I ordered, found a corner table, and pulled out my phone. There was a new voicemail. No number. When I played it, there was only my voice. Come see. By the time I got home, the binder was sitting on my doormat. No Mara, no delivery driver, just the binder, damp at the edges from the concrete. It was open to the same page, only now, a second line had been added beneath the original sentence. If it follows you home, burn this page before nightfall. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen with every light on, the binder open in front of me, lighter in hand. At 11:58 p.m., from the other side of my apartment door, I heard my own voice. It was humming, a song I hadn't sung in years. The lighter flame shook as I touched it to the page. The ink blistered, edges curling, the smell of burning notebook paper filling the kitchen. The humming stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. The next morning, the binder is back on the shelter's front desk, perfectly intact, with a final rule written inside. Do not leave Bramblewood. The first thing I saw when I stepped into the shelter that morning was the binder. It was right where I'd left it the first day, front desk, middle of the counter, but the pages were bone dry, the ink crisp, no sign of the burn marks from the night before. The last page was new, not loose leaf this time. It was laminated, like all the official rules, printed in the same faded typewriter font. Do not leave Bramblewood. No explanation, no exception. I stood there, rainwater dripping from my jacket onto the floor, staring at that line until the words stopped looking like words. Leave where? The town, the county, or just the shelter? Before I could ask, Mara appeared behind me. She didn't bother with good mornings. You saw it? Yeah. What's that supposed to mean? Her mouth twitched like she wanted to answer, but thought better of it. Some rules aren't there to be explained. They're there to keep things where they belong. And what belongs? I asked. She didn't answer. The day's tasks were the same as always. Feed, clean, check intake. The animals were unusually quiet, like they were listening for something outside the building. It wasn't until I was in the dog wing that I noticed the smell faint at first, like rainwater pooling on old carpet, then sharper, the metallic tang of wet fur. When I looked out the back door window, I saw the trees swaying hard against the wind, but there was no wind on my face when I cracked the door open. Just stillness, and a figure, standing between the trees at the property line. At first, I thought it was a person in a raincoat, hood pulled low, but the longer I looked, the more wrong the shape seemed, the shoulders too narrow, the arms too long, the head slightly tilted, like it was listening. I couldn't make out a face. Then, even over the sound of the dogs starting to whine, I heard it. My voice. Come see. The same tone, the same rhythm, the exact same way it had sounded outside my apartment door. I slammed the back door shut and locked it. By the time Mara found me in the supply closet, my hands were still shaking. It's here, I told her. Outside, at the property line. She didn't look surprised. That's why the rule's there. It doesn't like boundaries. And once it learns your voice, it'll try to get you to cross them. I swallowed. What happens if I do? She met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw fear in hers. You don't come back. The rest of the shift passed in a kind of suspended haze. I avoided every window, every door that looked out onto the woods. The animals seemed calmer when I kept to the interior halls, though a few of them, Jupiter especially, kept staring toward the back of the building, ears twitching like they could still hear it calling. At closing time, Mara locked the front doors herself. You need to decide, she said, slipping the binder into her bag. If you're going to keep coming back, you can't leave town. You'll be safe inside Bramblewood. And if I don't, then make sure you never hear your own voice again. I didn't sleep that night. My phone buzzed with 2 new voicemails. Both were empty at first, no sound at all. But when I played them a second time, the audio was there. Humming. That same melody from the other night. My melody. Morning came with a low fog that clung to the streets. I drove to the edge of town, half expecting to see the figure waiting in the ditch, but the road out of Bramblewood was blocked. Not by police, not by a fallen tree, by nothing. The asphalt simply stopped, ending in a strip of dirt and weeds, as if the road had never gone farther than that. When I checked my GPS, it showed me driving in circles. The clock on my dashboard flickered 8:12 a.m., then 8:13, then back again until I turned the car around. By the time I got back to the shelter, Mara was outside, sweeping leaves from the entryway. She didn't ask where I'd been. She didn't need to. Some people, she said, think they can leave when they want. That's not how it works here. I glanced past her at the front desk, where the binder sat waiting. The last page was still open. Do not leave Bramblewood. This time, though, there was a faint smudge of handwriting beneath it. Not Mara's. Mine. Come see. That night, I walked the halls after closing, binder in hand, the animals watching me in absolute silence. Outside, past the windows, the figure was there again, closer this time, just beyond the parking lot lights. I pressed my hand against the glass. It tilted its head, and I swear I felt its breath fogging the window from the inside. I didn't open the door. I didn't answer it, but I didn't go home either. And when morning came, I was still at Bramblewood, just another thing that had decided not to leave.